Hello, and welcome to a new series on world literature where we invite famous writers and authors to share a coffee and some words on their great literary works. Today, on the 150th year since it was first published, we've invited Fyodor Dostoevsky to discuss the publisher's rebranding of Crime and Punishment with a flashy new cover and a foreword by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Mr. Dostoevsky, how does it feel to be alive and relevant in 2023?
This is some form of witchcraft. I must say, it feels strange. I've only spent a few moments in 2023, but I don't see any of my culture being lived.
Strange. Strange as in strange to be alive or strange to still be relevant? I mean, from a literary standpoint, it's almost as if you never died.
The entire thing is strange, but you plucked a dead man from the 1880s Russia and unearthed him. I see you have buildings not made of bricks. I see people looking at their little devices that resemble a notebook, but no one is talking to one another. In my day, everyone spoke, and in fact, you couldn't shut them up. And intellectuals wrote. Yes, I was a writer, nothing more. Nothing less. I'm not sure what the fanfare is about having me as a guest in the year of 2023.
Well, let me fill you in. You have been immortalized as much as any writer could. Your works have stood the test of time, and how can I put this nicely? There's been a resurgence of all things Russian coming in vogue again.
Well, I'm deeply honored that I stand out amongst what were the darkest days of Russia as a writer. I was in good company, and I hope many of my friends, Tolstoy, Turgenev, Gogol, are enjoying the same revival I am.
Yeah, well, you stand out there, your buddies, Tolstoy, Turgenev, Gogol, yes. There's been a constant need to revisit the great literary heroes. It's hoped that we can lure some people to crack open a 900-page book for the pure enjoyment of it. But if not, we hope that they get some value by interviewing you 140 years after you died.
So what do I owe it to this new interest in my old works? Why is everyone interested in Russia again?
The president of Russia, or Tsar as you knew him, attacked Ukraine in an all-out war.
But Ukraine is a part of Russia. Well, semantics aside, why is Ukraine not willing to ally with Russia?
Ukraine wants to remain independent and become a part of the West.
Become a part of the West? What? The West of what?
Of Western civilization, from the Greeks to the Romans to Britain to the Americas. Western society is, it's the cosmopolitan area of the world, the rich side, if you will. We have far more materialistic needs and wants than the rest of the world combined. We're consumers, and boy, does it show. However, Russia has half the oil.
Oil? Well, Russia has lots of oil, but not much purpose. What, are we still in reinventing the candle?
Indeed, it takes some time to accurately fill you in on how important oil has become. I know in your day there was little use for oil, but it's roughly worth half the world's economy now. So no more lamplighters, I'm afraid.
Presumably, Russia is part of the East. Would that be right to say?
No, Russia is pretty much its own entity. It has the Holy Eastern Orthodox Church in opposition to the Roman Catholicism of even your day, but of the West. But Russia remains a unique country that spans, pretty much the same lands as when you were alive.
After 140 years, Russia hasn't grown at all. Is that what you're telling me?
Oh, there was a period of communism where Russia and 28 countries were part of an absurdly large Soviet Union of states. But trust me, that is another interview entirely. But as miserable as you found Russia in 1880, it would be over 100 years until it was free again.
Oh, don't tell me it was that nutter Karl Marx who stirred all this up. Das Kapital was a lousy paper.
Bingo, Karl Marx. 100 million lives later, and some people want to try it again. I guess I should. It'd be fair to give you some backstory, just so you aren't naive to the situation, because Russia is the second strongest superpower in the world after America, of course. But for 70 years, Russia was in the grips of Karl Marx's communistic ideology. And it was a terrible time. And the days were as bleak and depressing as you seem to recall them. 100 million people were sent to gulags or were left to starve while being surrounded by food that was going to the military. And it wasn't until the internal economy could no longer support the ideology that the Soviet Union fell apart. But today it is just as strong, if not stronger, because it has a capitalist economy, but it still retains that specific Russian common sense that the rest of the world just doesn't seem to get or understand. So this opposition has been around since you were alive.
I knew the engine in Russia would outlive history, but I would have miscalculated that it would become its true self through the action of being true to herself. She's formidable. I'm not too happy to hear Ukraine does not want to be on the side of the victor, even if I'm not on the side of the victor.
The world doesn't really consider Russia the victor. History hasn't been kind to Russia.
Very well. History has narrow grip on happiness. Happiness is fleeting and usually only best seen in hindsight. But time has been kind to writers, it seems, yes?
Well, yes and no. The world of writing has become somewhat of a dead horse. Today, people create content, and not all content requires writers or any writing at all. People are actually losing contact with the craft.
Well, what is it that you literary heroes in 2023 are into? What keeps people entertained?
Netflix, Disney Plus. It's the same, but different. We had a glorious run of a woman who wrote a series of novels about a boy called Harry Potter.
I see. So literature is still a strong concept among intellectuals.
Harry Potter was mainly for children. But I wouldn't say literature has much value, which is to say that when people go looking for the greatest of great writing works of the past, they never invariably end up crossing your path.
Aha! Dusty got his foot caught in a door of history. Was it the door of a gambling den in Irkutsk, or a casino in Sochi? I wasn't so sure it survived the Tsar and his gang of misfits.
Well, indeed, you are one of the top 5 most quoted literary celebrities of your time, and are often thought of as the deepest psychological thinker of Russia. Do you know Friedrich Nietzsche?
No. Sounds incredibly hard to spell. A native of Germany, I would suppose.
Indeed, correct. Well, he was another writer, and he said of all the writers he's read, only you had anything to teach him.
Oh, I'm thrilled to hear this. This man is thought of great and respected writer, yes?
Well, he was a great kind of man, but he was rather sour and unhappy, and he died in an insane asylum. But he's most famously quoted for writing or stating that God is dead.
My word, what an astounding claim. It's brilliant from so many writerly positions. What you could do with that concept.
Well, let's get into the reason you're here today. Your novel, Crime and Punishment, is 150 years old, and this sleek new cover was designed to invite people back to the classics.
Marvelous cover. I would recognize myself anywhere. But is my hair blue when you turn it?
Blue hair. Yeah, it's a thing.
Interesting.
Now, Crime and Punishment is 900 pages of hefty word crafting. I mean, it'd choke a horse. Can you give us a quick synopsis of what it's about?
My main character kills a woman and her sister and gets away with it.
No, Dostoevsky, you've given away the whole book.
Oh no, this sort of happens early on.
Well, then what fills the 900 pages?
Well, the Raskolnikov, the man who commits his unspeakable acts and gets away with the murders. But he discovers that the Raskolnikov before the murders and the man he is after the murders are not the same person. He become a monster. He taunts the police.
In that his mind is forced to accept what he's done.
Precisely. He escaped the police, but he didn't escape his own mind.
Well, that's a nail-biting plot. What made you sit down and write about such a grisly act?
Oh, gambling debts mainly.
You wrote 900 pages to get you out of debt?
I wrote most of my works to get me out of debt. In fact, I had the inclination to write. That means I was a worthy person, a gifted speaker, a steward of the language, but I couldn't just sit down and write 900 pages. No, that required a gun to my head. That required fear of absolute death by my debtors, to be beaten and left to die in the snowy bank. I wasn't born noble and rich like damn Tolstoy, and could not just write whenever I wanted. I had to work for my sustenance, and I had to include gambling in my sustenance, in my job. It was my hobby. I wouldn't eat so that I could afford to gamble. And do you know, I never had any plan to do something with my winnings if I ever won big. No, I just wanted a horse and a cozy view of perhaps a river, a nice suite. But I had the story in my head and I had the debts, and my publisher offered me a sum of money to cover my debts if I could write. So I didn't know it was going to be as big as it was until my publisher was happy with what he was reading. As long as he was paying me, I just kept writing.
I see. Were you a blackjack man?
Sadly, I was a deck of cards man. I was a dice man. I was a game of chance man. But I was a lousy man. I wasn't sure. You know, if I did not had the debt, I would not be here 140 years after my own natural death. It seems rather odd to me.
Well, you went on to write the Brothers Karamazov, which is weighs in at 1,200 pages.
Well, yes, I was a bad gambler. I was a prolifically bad gambler. And I had debts from here to Vladivostok. I owed money to everyone. And the trick is, I was paid by the word. So, to write long made more sense.
So, what gave you the stomach for such tragic content?
All life in Russia was tragedy in my day. Depression ran deep through every Russian crack. And the ingredients of my book are such that Raskolnikov, who was a likable college-age young man who murdered the pawnbroker who kept offering him insufferable low money for the objects he was turning into her. So he had the motive. He was poor and he was losing his precious keepsakes to a woman who was giving him half the price just to be a crazy old character. I mean, no one would mind if she died. No one should feel sorry if he reads the book. He should not feel sorry for the old woman. I painted her as a cold, hard subject to be revolted by, making the murder something the reader himself should secretly want Raskolnikov to do. And then I explored the relationship between the two.
Mr. Dostoevsky, you traveled around much of Russia and Europe, unlike many of your contemporaries. What were your feelings of Russia in your time?
It was a disaster. Russia was like seeing horse and buggy accident and not being able to look away. The Tsar was this prepubescent and unqualified leader who disliked anyone above him. And me being in the warm breast of the intellectuals, all of whom were smarter than the dear Tsar. So the ruling class always had a problem with the intellectual class, who saw through his schemes and policies and often wrote unflattering opinions of him, whether it was that Tsar or the one before. There were no good Tsars, and they were always cannon fodder for writers, so they cracked down and called us dissidents.
But there's a soul to Russia. In fact, if any country in the world has a soul, it is Russia, historically. And you don't paint a positive spin or call it utopia or even pretend that it was any better than it was. Russia is just lying there in the pages in black and white. Surely there must have been nostalgia or some better iterations of Russia than the one you saw. You didn't try to please the Tsar by praising Russia. You kept it down and dirty with old whores, drunkards, and soiled streets.
Nostalgia is always a time you fondly remember before something changed and made it nostalgic. Honestly, you're bitter forever after the nostalgic charm has ended. I mean, to be truthful, it may never have been great. Times were never always better. It may only have seemed better than it was. But change is inevitable. And most change, as I found it, has been bad. Usually motivated by greed or entropy. Buildings get old and fall down, and new buildings are built. Fires often ate away cities in my day. Now, here is Dostoevsky's secret. See, I only found solace when I went for a nightly walk, and I'd often walk for hours in the deep dark. Russia's soul was alive with candlelight and cobblestone, some stinging rain or a wheeze of winter flurries. It was only during these walks that I defended Russia. But writing in the cold light of day, I did her justice. For good or bad, I forced my hand to write what I saw, not what I wished it to be. There never was a dream of utopia in Russia. Our morality would not survive.
Well, I've run out of my questions, but I have to ask you, what made you continue on? You sound like you have the soul of Russia. Rather, your finger was on the pulse of the Russian soul, more than your contemporaries. Your fingerprints are all over Russia, and as seen from the past. How did you capture it so well, and what gave you the ability to etch out what you saw?
Gambling debts.
Of course there are gambling debts. I mean, you went further. You caught Russia in a moment that still lives on. People see the history of Russia largely through the writerly roots you planted. Of course, other writers have come to mind, but you solidified the Russian novel in such a way that people who have never been to Russia can easily feel part of themselves in your work.
Well, when I was arrested with all my comrades and we were all tied to poles and the firing squad started shooting my friends, I remember thinking a prayer that should God spare me this miserable conclusion to an already sad and pathetic life, that I would become the most revered Russian writer in history. I said I would do history justice. And as the firing squad moved to shoot to me, I was given a reprieve at the last moment and sent to a Siberian gulag for half a decade. Then I was forced into the army for another 5 years. I don't know how I survived from day to day, but across my life, I brought the country to its knees through my books. I mean, that was the blurb my publishers came up with, and I don't know if it sold books, but it captures what he and others in his elite world of thought about my writing. So, although I died a long and insufferable natural death, I knew God and I had an understanding.
Oh, that's fascinating. But it's been a pleasure to be able to interview you for this new edition, Mr. Dostoevsky, and I've been thrilled to sit here and ask you firsthand about your writing, your life, and Russia.
Well, it's not every day I get to see a glimpse of 2023, so much of this pleasure has been mine.
Fyodor Dostoevsky, thank you very much.
Spasibo, Brent. I thank you.